lady down who was all the way 8.
Oh, that's the one that was at Ace. Okay, I did see that.
I was so
Yeah.
my baby was gone. Yeah, and I mean I didn't think to go that far to look for one.
Well, guys, I guess it's about time to get things rolling. So we're going to go ahead and just start off. And I don't know another way to start off better than just saying thank you, everybody, for coming. It's great to see some people coming up to support Lucian, and we're excited about the baptisms we're doing today. Yes, Katie as well. And so, just want to say thank you for coming, and we're glad you're here. As far as, I guess, announcements go, we pretty much have the normal sort of thing going on. Of course, we have recovery groups that we I won't say produce, we assist with. On Monday for ladies at the Reunion Center, 7 o'clock. So Monday, 7 o'clock for the ladies. Tuesdays, 7:30 for the guys. And it's basically just whatever sort of addiction you or somebody you know is going through, this is a good place to come and get the support you need in order to get through that. So we're doing that. There is the tea party going on, and that's this Saturday, right?
No.
No.
The last Saturday of the month.
Last Saturday of the month. I'm going to work. Maybe I will. I'm not planning on going, so it's not on my calendar. Sorry. It's not a high priority for my brain to remember, I'm afraid. But yeah, there's a slide coming here. It's for ladies, and it's at Board Baptist Church, and it's one of their ministries that they do, and they're just trying to spread the nets wide and help include other churches, because there is only one church in Comanche County, and it's just, we meet in different places. We don't always act like one church, I'll be the first to admit, but God only has one church. That's always the way it's been. But I guess with that, now there's the slide. But anyway, got questions, you can ask Tanya. You can ask me, and I can go ask Tanya, you know. But I guess we'll go ahead and get things rolling. So we're going to go ahead and start off with worship. So if you want to stay sitting, then stay sitting. If you feel like you need to stand up, then stand up. And we'll worship however you feel comfortable. All right, we're going to start off with Love Came Down. My heart is filled with hope, and every promise comes my way. When I feel your hands of grace rest upon me, staying desperate for you, God, staying humbled at your feet. I will lift these hands in faith. I will believe, and I remind myself of all that you've done. Praise God that He came down. Man. And the life we have in His Son. Just a great reminder. Because, yeah, we can live life without, we can have lots of fun, lots of highs, lots of lows like life. And as Christians, we got that too. But life is so much better with Jesus than it is without. I mean, it doesn't really compare. And then, like I always like to say, for the believer, this life is as bad and as hard as it gets. And heaven is so much better. And what waits for us after is so much better. But for the person who's not a believer, man, this life is as good as it gets. So life with its highs and lows, man, that's all you got, if that's the case. All right. We're going to sing The Wonderful Cross.
Demands my soul, my
Oh, the wonderful cross. Oh, the wonderful cross. It's me come and die and find that I may truly live. Oh, the wonderful cross. Oh, the wonderful cross. All who gather here by grace draw near and bless your name. Oh, the wonderful cross. Oh, the wonderful cross. Gives me come and die and find that I may truly live. Oh, the wonderful cross. Oh, the wonderful cross. All who gather here by grace draw near and bless your name. All right, we got one more we're going to do. This is Who I Am, but I got to reach in.
Who you
Give me
say
a
I
sec.
am.
Yes, what did I say?
Who I am.
Oh, yeah, who you say I am. I'm usually only good for one thought at a time, and tuning and talking at the same time. It's kind of iffy, so. Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free. Oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he's ransomed me. Oh, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. And I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Yes, I am. forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. And I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. All right. Go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. Well, again, I want to say thanks to everybody for coming out. It's great to be able to worship with you today. And I love days like this because this is kind of a... We talk about certain Sundays being the Super Bowl Sunday of churches. And if you run in church circles, you know that's probably Christmas and Easter. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But honestly, the days that we get together and we baptize somebody who is a new believer in Christ, that's really the Super Bowl Sunday. It doesn't get the flashy celebration that Christmas does or the press that Easter does, because every year stuff comes out around Easter about Jesus and the resurrection and how reliable the idea of that is. But man, this is what it's about, because Jesus told us to go out into the whole world and make disciples of all men. And so everywhere we go, that's what we're called to do. Go out, find somebody who doesn't know about Jesus, make the formal introduction, and then teach them what it means to follow Jesus. Because it's more than going to church. Much as I believe, obviously, that going to church is a good thing. I definitely see the value in that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here in the first place. So, but it's so much more than that. Because if you only act like a Christian when you're at church on Sunday, you miss the point. It's got to be the other 6 and 9/10 of a day that's when it shows that you're really Christian. That's when the rubber meets the road. And just like 1 John 3:18 says, tells us, little children, let us love not in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Because it's one thing to say, I love you, and it's another thing to show it. And the church has been historically, generally, pretty good. Not to say we've been awesome at it the whole time, but we've been pretty good about saying, I love you, but we haven't been very good at showing that all the time. We have our moments. We have some great times, but the United States of America, when they think of the church, does not think of the church as a place full of loving people. It's just the reality of it. You can do a survey with whatever organization you want to get to do it and just ask people if they think people in the church are loving or not, and the answer is going to come back, a majority of them are going to say no. And so that's part of the mission here at Live Oak Church, is that we want to change that perception, at least in this area of the country, and really wherever we go. Because we bring Jesus with us wherever we go, so whether we're going grocery shopping in Brookshires, or whether we're taking a vacation in Florida or wherever, it doesn't matter. We take Jesus with us, and we show people what it means to be a believer. And that's not a small thing. We've been going through this series talking about overall just the idea that God is with us, because we're looking at the Gospel of John, and if there's a main point to the Gospel of John, it's that God is with us, that Jesus came down. He is God in human form, And I just keep trying to say, we need to not take that for granted. Because I'm just stopping and think about it. There's an infinite God who created the universe. That he's everywhere all at the same time. He can do anything he wants to. He can make a new universe if he wanted to do that. He could change a person's heart if that's what he wanted to do. And the same God who keeps every single atom held together, who provides that magnetic force, who provides the source for gravity, everything that we know and understand in the physical universe, he thought it all up. He created it all, he set it all in motion, and it keeps going because he wants it to. That God came down and sandwiched himself into a body, not just any body, but a body of someone even smaller than Nehemiah is right now. He was born a little baby, helpless, just like any other baby, crying when he was hungry, just like any other baby, or when he's sleepy. And he raised up, he grew up, he went through every age from Nehemiah's to Lucian's to Joshua's to mine, and, well, I guess he didn't quite make it to 44. They crucified him for that. So, at any rate, this God didn't come to do it just to show off. Really, I guess you could say he came to show up. Because we needed him. You remember that the Bible talks about 4,000 years worth of history here. And during that 3,000 to 4,000 years of history, if you're going to take one lesson away from all that time, all those people in the Bible, the very least you can come up with is that ain't nobody perfect. And if you read the Bible, actually read it, you're going to see that it's not filled with awesome men of God who are heroes and paragon of virtue and these people that we would just look up to and build statues for because they're just so awesome. It's like, no, God picked like the biggest losers he could find, people who are the most morally bankrupt sometimes, and he took those people and he used them. And he still does that today. So there's nobody who's too far gone. And that's a big part of what Jesus came down to show us. When he came down to redeem anybody and everybody. It wasn't just the quote-unquote church people that he came for. And that's a big part of what the Gospel of John is here to show us. At any time Jesus came into a situation, he basically came in and he shaped that conversation. And he was so different from anybody else who had ever lived that every single conversation of the people who knew him and followed him, he changed those conversations. So even when Jesus wasn't there, he was still shaping the conversation in the room. And we see that in John chapter 3 when Jesus sits down and he talks with a man who was a Pharisee, a religious leader, a big teacher, highly respected guy in Israel. He was teaching everybody what it meant to follow God's law and his commandments. And Jesus sat him down, and whatever conversation that Nehemiah had not Nehemiah. I'm looking at him. That name's coming into my head. Sorry, not talking to you. Nicodemus. When he sat down with Nicodemus, whatever idea that Nicodemus had in his head that he wanted to talk about, Jesus kind of just dismissed that. He basically said, look, I know you came with something you wanted to talk about, but we need to talk about what you need to talk about. And that's one of the great things about Jesus, is that so often is that whether it's these people who are in power, whether it's governmental power or just religious power, they come to Jesus and they try to trip him up. They try to get him to destroy his popularity with people. Because anytime you come healing people who are sick, and and telling people, hey, it's not the way you think it is. Man, he was, we don't think of it today in the United States because we've grown up with the name of Jesus, but Jesus was a rebel. He was revolutionary for his time, and he just completely threw the entire world on its head. And we're going to take a look, we're going to dip our toes in that today with the conversation we're looking at. But with Nicodemus, he sits down and he says, what you think you need isn't really what you need, it's just what you want. What you need to know is what we hear, and we hear this verse so often, John 3:16. I'm on the wrong page here. For God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. So Nicodemus needed to know and understand that just following the law wasn't going to cut it. If you read the Bible later on in the book of Romans, it's one of the larger books in the New Testament. But a big part of what it's trying to say is that the law, the main thing it's good for is telling us that we can't cut it on our own. We're not good enough. God has a standard that's perfection, and we can't reach it. Because all it takes is one screw up, and suddenly we cannot reach the standard anymore. One sin, one mess up, no matter how small, that little white lie you told disqualified you. Didn't matter what else you've done. And so none of us is perfect. Jesus had to come down, live the life that we couldn't live. And then he died the death that we deserve so that we could spend eternity in heaven with him. And that's what Nicodemus needed to learn, is that the law couldn't cut it for getting you into heaven because you didn't deserve it. Matter of fact, even in the Old Testament, we see glimpses of that because when it's talking about Abraham, the very first person that God called out to come follow him and form the nation of Israel from, we see that it tells us that Abraham believed God, and basically that was the reason why he was credited as being righteous before God. It wasn't that he followed the law. It wasn't that he did his to-do list every single day. It wasn't anything he did. It was what changed him, that belief that there's a God out there who loves him and who's worth following, who's good all the time. So, Jesus comes into that conversation with Nicodemus and he flips it up on its head. And that's what he does with almost every conversation he comes into. People come into a conversation with an agenda. It's like, hey, I need to go talk to so-so, and we need to talk about X, Y, and Z. And that's just all of us. And if you're anything like me, I often, if it's one that I know is not going to go easy, I tend to reverse that conversation in my mind. And it almost never goes the way I plan it, but that's beside the point. The point is I'm rehearsing it so that I know what I want to say. Well, Nicodemus didn't get that far. Jesus flipped that conversation on its head. At the end of chapter 3, we see John the Baptist in a conversation with the disciples. And these disciples are just put out because all these people are now going to Jesus to get baptized instead of coming to John, the Baptist. Also, in some versions of the Bible, he's called John the Baptizer. So you get the idea. That's his shtick. That's what he does. And his disciples are put out. So suddenly, their job is being stolen by Jesus and his disciples. And that just ain't cool. And they didn't get it. And so John turned that conversation up on its head because he's basically saying, hey, you guys remember, I said that Jesus is the one we've been waiting for. He's the Messiah. He's the one that all of those prophecies are about. We've been waiting for him. And so he's now doing his thing. And you know what I got to do? I've got to shrink. I've got to make my ministry less and less. People need to listen to me less. And they need to listen to Jesus more and more. So John flipped everything on its head for his disciples. And that brings us to chapter 4, and that's where we're at today. So chapter 4, we're not going to get very far into it today. I want to keep things kind of short. But John chapter 4, goes like this. It says, Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John. Though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, his disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon the Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. And that's as far as we're going to get. But basically, Jesus had been discipling people, and masses of people had been coming from Jerusalem to come see him.
So basically, he's testing you?
No, not really. What people are coming to do is they're coming to hear whatever it is that Jesus has to say. That they want to know what it is, how it is that Jesus is turning the world on its head. I mean, because bear in mind, John the Baptist was outside the religious norm. But his message, at its root, was something that the religious leaders were basically okay with. Hey, John the Baptist basically came saying, hey, the Messiah is coming. You guys need to repent and get straight with God. My words, not his. But that's pretty much what he came and said. And although his ways were different, very different, but the basic message the religious leaders were fine with. So they were okay with John the Baptist. Not their favorite guy, but still okay. Well, Jesus comes along, and he's like, I'm the guy you've been waiting for. So everything starts getting turned on its head. And the religious leaders don't like people going to John the Baptist anyway, because that's their crowd that John the Baptist is pulling from. Now suddenly, Jesus is drawing even bigger crowds. And they are not thrilled about that at all. So, basically, Jesus is out there in the wilderness, baptizing people. People are coming from miles and miles away. This is not like, hey, my house is 3 blocks that way. No, it's like, we don't need to just pack lunch. We need to pack like 2 days worth of food to go hear Jesus. Because it's going to take us a while to go there, and it's going to take us a while to get back. And we're going to stay tonight. He was not within reach of Jerusalem. It was not just a 2-hour walk or anything like that. It was a big journey. He was closer to a nation called Samaria than to the city of Jerusalem. But at any rate, Jesus had lots of run-ins with these religious leaders. And there's times that he absolutely confronted them. And he basically took whatever it is that they had to say, and again, he'd turn it around so that they were surprised by what he had to say. And they tried to make Jesus look like a fool, but he ended up making them look like a fool. And hopefully making those guys question. Because one of the things that's awesome about Jesus is that he didn't just get into an argument for the sake of winning an argument. He got into an argument for the sake of winning the people in the argument. I don't know if you see the difference there, but I can promise there is a difference. Because there was a point in time in my life when I was the guy who wanted to win the argument. I would have like the Mormon missionaries or whoever else come to my door, and we would get into these religious discussions. And most of the time I won. But you know what? Not one of those guys ever came to church with me later. Because I didn't care so much about them. I cared about winning the argument. And now I'm hopefully, a little more mature than I was. I don't have those guys knocking on my door anymore. I don't know if that's God or what, or if they just don't come around here in Texas as often as they do in Phoenix, Arizona. But either way, it's just not that common. But Jesus, he had his eye on the right thing the whole time. He had his eye on the people, because that's what he came for. He didn't come to get power. He didn't come to get respect, influence, anything like that. He came for people. He came to win hearts. I guess you could call it, these days we call it probably a grassroots campaign. Because he's going basically almost door to door. He would go to a place and people would hear about him coming and they're like, oh, well, let's go check him out. Anyway, so Jesus is going away from where he's baptizing, and he's doing that because the Pharisees heard that he was doing it. And it's not that he was scared of them, because, like I said, there's times he confronted them in their own territory. But there was a time, one of the things I've learned as an adult is that there's a time for a fight, and there's a time that you need to avoid that fight. Just like I learned, and honestly I learned it before that when I was a kid, like you learn there's a time you ask your parents for whatever it is that you want, and then there you recognize they're in a bad mood. This is not the time to ask. Well, life is a lot like that. Timing is everything. So Jesus understood this wasn't the time for confrontation. So he packed up and he decided to go back to his home territory called Galilee. Well, I don't have a map here, but down in the south is Jerusalem and Judea, okay? Judea being basically the nation. And up here is the region called Galilee, which is still, certainly as far as religious purposes go, it's part of Judea. But you know what's smack dab in the middle? This region called Samaria. Now, if you've gone to church, you kind of understand that there's some tension there. That Jews didn't like Samaritans and Samaritans didn't like Jews. It was racial conflict. But I want to kind of get into this and help you guys understand that this isn't just a minor conflict. This is something that's been going on for hundreds, no, actually for well over 1,000 years. Basically what happened, how it started up is that there was a king. He was over all 12 of the tribes of Israel. And this nation called Israel was under first King Saul, and then King David took over, and then David's son Solomon took over. And Solomon, despite having wisdom, still made some serious mistakes. And basically God told Solomon, as a result of this, because your dad was such a man after my own heart, he was so in tune with me, that I'm not going to carry this punishment out on you, his beloved son. Even though he's dead and gone, I'm not going to punish you for your sin. What I'm going to do is that later on, your son's going to reap the rewards for your misdeed. And, man, I hate to say it, but sometimes that's reality. We don't always suffer consequences of our actions. Sometimes it's those who follow behind us. It's our kids. And that sucks. And a big part of me says that's not fair, but honestly, that is life. And we need to understand that. But at any rate, Solomon made his mistakes, and his son, Rehoboam, was the one who reaped the whirlwind there. And so basically what happens is that the kingdom splits into two pieces. Rehoboam himself was no gem. I mean, Solomon made mistakes. Rehoboam tried to figure out how to make bigger mistakes. Almost seriously. That was like, he had his dad's advisors who were older, wiser men, and then he had his friends. He went to his friends for advice and ignored the older, wiser people. So when the people of Israel come in saying, hey, you know, your dad was pretty hard on us, can you ease up a bit? Rehoboam listened to his friend and said, oh, you think my dad was hard? Man, he's going to wait till I get a hold of you. And he made everything worse. And so sure enough, what happens? The leader rises up, civil war happens, and 10 of the tribes of Israel, pretty much, go and form their own nation. They call it Israel. And then the southern kingdom, which is still under Rehoboam and his descendants, they're called the kingdom of Judah. Well, Judah is where we get the name Jew from. So, we've got the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom called Judah. And there was fights. Matter of fact, it was Rehoboam's son. The Bible says that there was fighting all the days of his life between Israel and Judah. I mean, it's just It was constant conflict. So this is going on now for 2 generations, but that's not enough. Later on, a nation called Babylon, which is one of the big empires of the world at that point in time, comes in. They conquer the northern kingdom of Israel, and they do what they always do. They take the rich people, the smart people, and they cart them off to Babylon to integrate them culturally into their society. And they leave the poor and the less than bright people there in Israel. And matter of fact, that wasn't even enough. He takes some other tribes of foreigners and he basically moves them into that territory. And basically says, you guys are now in charge of this territory and you just live and do whatever you see fit. As long as you're following my rule and reign, we're good. So that's Israel. And so what happens is that the Jews that remained there married some of the people who moved in. And they started following the gods who moved in. Matter of fact, the very first king of the northern kingdom of Israel, he decided to help prevent people from his brand new kingdom from going down to Jerusalem to worship. Because, God forbid they go down to Jerusalem to worship and they actually, maybe get some influence from that whole area. He wanted to keep them at home. So he basically set up 2 golden calves, one in the northern and one in the southern part of his kingdom. He basically said, hey, these are the places you need to go to worship now. This is the God that brought you out of Egypt. This is the God who did all the miracles. So these 2 calves, that's where you need to go worship. And he does that, and it only gets worse. The Babylonian Empire later on conquers the kingdom of Judah, and he does the same basic thing. He basically invites makes all the rich and the smart people, all the wisest, best people that Judah has to offer, takes them off to Babylon, and they live there. And he just leaves the poor people. And the whole countryside is destitute. Well, years later, the king gives permission for the Jews to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild. Well, there was a problem. The people in the northern kingdom, they didn't like that for whatever reason. So they literally did everything they could to make the job difficult for rebuilding Jerusalem. So there's that tension. So we see the split up between one nation and another, kind of like their civil war. And then we see tensions building through that. We see religious division. The Jews in the southern kingdom going and doing things in Jerusalem and worshiping the way that the Bible told them to. And then people in the northern kingdom got a diluted version of the Bible, and they started doing religion plus everything that was in the area. And so the religion is inherently different. I mean, it looks pretty similar, but it's not the same. Anyway, these guys go ahead, and there's this tension building. And then along comes Alexander the Great. And you basically get 2 different reactions. The northern kingdom, which they go ahead and they help out Alexander the Great. They basically say, we don't want to be conquered, so we're just going to give up and we're going to help you out. Well, the southern kingdom, they said, no, we're going to fight. They still got conquered, but you see the 2 different reactions. And so the northern kingdom basically helped Alexander the Great conquer Jerusalem and its surrounding country. And so there's a little bad blood in that. But it doesn't even end there. Later on, just before, like 100 years before Jesus came along, there's this thing called the Maccabean Revolt. Okay, so basically, in Jerusalem, there's a revolt. They establish their own king. It's this family named Maccabees. And anyway, what this family does, one of the things they do is that they invade the northern kingdom and they tear down the temple that's on, Mount Gerizim. And they lay that to waste, and then they go back home. So we see this tension building up time and time again. But honestly, what it comes down to is this. It is those religious differences. Because for the Jew, religion was everything. They were okay. They didn't like the Romans coming in and conquering them, but the Romans let them worship the way they wanted to. So as much as they didn't like it, they basically settled in. And they lived with it. And they were okay with it because they could worship God the way that they had been raised to do that. The northern kingdom, they didn't. And this northern kingdom over the centuries came to be known as Samaria. So they're mixed racially between Jewish people and other foreign nations. And then they're also worshiping a different way. They're worshiping other gods along with God. And so all the purity and everything that the southern kingdom held on to, worshiping God, keeping their bloodlines purely Jewish, that was all very important to them. And the northern tribe is just saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to worship our own way. We're going to marry whoever we want to marry. And we're going to do things our way, not the way you people think that God's telling you to live. We're going to do it the way we think God is telling us to live. And that's basically what it comes down to, is that the Jews, as we see in Jesus' time, they looked at Samaritans as basically mixed race, which all you got to do is talk to somebody of mixed heritage here in the U.S., and you can hear story after story about how life is harder because of that. And that's just a small glimpse of it. But that's one reason the Jews look down on them. And then they're also mixing their religion with all kinds of other religions. It's kind of just this glop, this soup of anything they could find in the fridge. They threw it in the soup and hoped it turned out okay. That's kind of the religion of Samaria. So they didn't stay pure racially. They didn't stay pure religiously. And so the Jews looked at Samaritans as basically just this mongrel race. And the Samaritans looked at the Jews as this snooty people who were automatically racist, and so they didn't like them either. And so basically what would happen is that if a Jew needed to go from down south, around Jerusalem, say, and they needed to go to Galilee, which was still part of the Jewish nation, instead of going the straight way, right through Samaria, what they would do is they'd go east, they'd cross the Jordan River, then they'd go north, and then they'd cross the Jordan River again, go back west, get into Galilee. That was a normal thing to do. And so they did all that, all to avoid contact with Samaritans. And now, getting back to where we are with Jesus, Jesus doesn't see it that way at all. He's like, I got to go to Galilee. So, like it said here in chapter 4, it says, Jesus knew the Pharisees heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John, though Jesus himself didn't baptize him, his disciples did. So, he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go through Samaria on the way. Now, that seems like a small statement, but again, when every other Jew with a lick of common sense is going around this countryside, that's a bold statement. This is, again, the same Jesus who is not afraid to toss tables in the temple, who is not afraid to call the religious leaders these graves that are just painted white on the outside but full of death and decay on the inside. He calls them a brood of vipers. It's a guy who wasn't afraid to toss off tradition to be able to do what God had sent him to do. So he ditches all that tradition, all this common sense that every Jew knew, and he tosses it and he just cuts right straight through Samaria. It's as bold as day. And no apology, no hesitation. Verse 4, he had to go through Samaria on the way. Well, verse 5, eventually he came to a Samaritan village of Sychar near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob as well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. So Jesus is exhausted from a half a day's worth of walking. It's a hot day. He sits down, sends his disciples into town to go get food and come back. Okay? And so he's there by himself. Now, it was a traditional role back in biblical times that women would go to the well and collect water for the day. So they would carry these huge jars to the well. But, that's hot, heavy work. And you don't do that in the middle of the day if you got sent. I mean, it'd be like going out and trying to dig up cedars in the middle of the countryside at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a better time of the day to do it. That's common sense. Well, this lady's avoiding that. But Jesus, again, don't miss the fact that he was revolutionary for his time. So Jesus said to her, says it right there, verse 7. Jesus said to her, that little phrase right there is huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge because, again, Jews don't go through Samaria. Why? Because they don't want to mess with the Samaritans at all. They don't want to talk to them. They don't want to buy anything from them. They don't want to be within 100 feet of them. But Jesus is talking to one. It'd be like, honestly, it would be a lot like a black person going to a KKK meeting and sitting down and talking to the person across the table from them. I mean, it's that kind of racial tension. It's huge. And it's not even just racial tension, because you know what? Another one of those traditions, men don't talk to just random women. That's not what you do. If you needed to do business, you went and talked to a guy. You didn't talk to a lady. It's not like here in the U.S. where, hey, you're both on the subway in New York City, you just strike up conversation with someone across the way from you. Or, you're in the grocery store, you're in line and you're talking to the person who's in front of you. Just, hey, you doing a barbecue or something? We make conversation. That's what we do here in the U.S. We're known for that world, all across the world. People think we're weird for it. So for Jesus to start up a random conversation with a random woman is just bizarre. And I really can't say that enough. It really shows how much Jesus was dedicated not to the traditions, but to the mission God gave him. That the Father has set out a course of things to get done. And Jesus was going to get that done. And Jesus later on, he says, my mission, I was sent to the house of Israel. I was sent to bring the house of Israel home. He doesn't say, I was sent to the house of Israel plus Samaria. He's taking a detour here by talking to this lady because this lady was worth talking to. We're going to see more about her next week. We're going to talk about that even just ignoring the fact that she's a Samaritan, even ignoring the fact that she's a woman, this conversation shouldn't be happening because she was somebody who was not living right. And we'll get into that, like I said, next week. But Jesus didn't care about his reputation. He cared about this person who was in front of him. And he was willing to set aside those traditions and the prejudices of his day, every single one of them, against race and against gender. He was willing to set those aside to talk to somebody who needed to know who he was and who God was and who she is in God. Because once we become a believer, it changes who we are. I mean, if you honestly become a believer, you are changed. Okay? I'm not saying everything all at once. Okay? I wish that was the case. Hadn't been the case with me and, frankly, anyone else I've known. But the point is, you set your life on a course that changes everything. Right down to why you do the things you do. Because you can worship whatever God, you can be a complete atheist, any other religion we want, and you can change your habits. You can leave behind a life of alcoholism, for example. And you can do that, and you don't need God in order to stop drinking alcohol. But what you do need is you need Jesus in order to change your why. And that's the thing that believing in Jesus does. He absolutely changes everything. Not just what we do, but why we do it. He revolutionized his times, and he revolutionizes us even today. And that's what being a disciple of Jesus is all about. It's about changing who we are and becoming more and more like Jesus. Because he said, that conversation with Nicodemus, it was all about believing. Believing in Jesus as the Messiah, the only one who could save people. The only one who could create people who are so new, it's like you were born again. You're this entirely different person. That's Jesus. That's what he does for us. He was revolutionary. And he tells us all over the place that, and he told us in Luke chapter 4 what his mission was. He says that basically I came to set those who are captive free. I came to heal those who were blind. And he's not talking just about physical blindness, although he did that too. But he's talking about people who are spiritually blinded, that they didn't really understand who God was. And here in Texas, everybody grows up with an understanding of who God is. But the problem is that we got it all, well, a lot of people got it all wrong. They think God is all about this to-do list. That it's okay, I got to go to church every Sunday. I got to give 10% of my income. I got this checklist of things I got to do. I got to read my Bible. I got to pray. I got to do. And Jesus wasn't about everything we got to do. He was about who we are. That's why we sing that song, I am who you say I am. Because when we believe, suddenly we're moved from a place where we don't believe to a place where we believe. And that's the whole discipleship journey. Moving from unbelief to belief in every single area of life. You know, if we're worried about being able to pay the bill, I mean, if we're genuinely concerned about that, and we're just going over time and time again, I don't know where the money's going to come from, I don't know how we're going to pay this bill, I'm at a loss. I can't do anything. I've done everything that I can do, but we do not have enough money to pay this bill. If you're at that point and that's your constant thought, your constant worry, then what we do as believers is we move from unbelief to belief in that area of life. That's what Jesus did. We stop looking to our own efforts, our own work to be able to pay all the bills. And sometimes we just got to sit down and we got to trust. We've done everything we can do, yes, but we got to trust God to provide. And we move from unbelief in that area of life to trusting God to meet every single one of our needs. And for people who have lived the life of an alcoholic or an addict, they move from the belief that that drug, that alcohol can provide a high, to being where we understand that Jesus is better than any drug or any liquor we can drink. It's just Jesus is plain better. And that's what it comes down to. And Jesus was willing to take that message to anyone and everyone. He was willing to cross racial division. He was willing to cross the traditions of not talking to the opposite sex. He was willing to do all that, all so that he could come and tell this lady what he's getting ready to. That basically, hey, I'm the guy we've been waiting for. I'm the Messiah. I've come to save everybody. And the day's coming where it doesn't matter where you worship, whether it's in Jerusalem or on a mountain or in your closet in Comanche, Texas. It doesn't matter. What matters is why we worship. Are we worshiping in spirit and in truth? So, thank you. That's what I really want you guys to get from this. Is this idea that Jesus was a revolutionary. There is a song that Tanya has turned me on to lately, and I'm pulling a blank on the name of the band. But the chorus goes something like, he's a good, good God, but good God, he is not tame. Because Jesus isn't some blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy like we see in the paintings so many times in church, sitting there praying peacefully. He didn't come to bring peace. He came to throw things up in the air so that we had to stop and look and see how wrong we had everything. That all these assumptions we came into life, both as Jews in Jesus' time and as Americans in 2021. All our assumptions, everything we come at things, we got it upside down. We got it all wrong. And Jesus was willing to throw it all upside down so that we would understand who he is, what he has to offer. And this lady from Samaria needed him. And she didn't know it. We need it, whether we know it or not. And it doesn't matter whether you're the most mature believer who's ever lived, or whether you're the most devout atheist that's ever lived. We still need him. Every single one of us. All right. Let's go ahead and close things off in prayer. Father God, I need you. I need Jesus so bad, it's pathetic. I just can't do it on my own. I've proven that so many times. It's painful. It's embarrassing. And I'm so grateful that you sent Jesus down here to live life as I can't live it. And to die the death that I have earned 100,000 times over and over again. So that I can spend eternity with you in paradise. It's going to be so much better than anything we know here. I'm so grateful for that. So, just work in our hearts. Help each and every one of us move in some area of life from where we don't believe what you said about who you are and who we are to where we do believe. Where we trust you for what you said about it. Because you are utterly and completely trustworthy all the time, every time. Thank you so much. Thank you for what you did on the cross, Jesus. Thank you that you proved you're more powerful than even death when you rose on the third day. Thank you so much. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. All right, guys. Again, thank you, everybody, for coming. And we're going to go ahead and shut down the transmission.